I heard this game was pretty fun. What it was like playing Black Myth Wukong. He just farted at me. He just farted, bro. The best thing about this game is the insane amount of bosses and how they're all different from one another. You'll fight a boss, turn the corner, and fight another, and they all have different movesets, so they didn't feel copy and paste either. Each boss has so many moves which keeps you guessing, and that really makes it fun. But what makes the game even more fun is how it rewards you for exploring. Chapter 1, you can find something called a horse guy. Although I felt this area was pointless, I talked to him for a bit then left, but I wish I would have exhausted his dialogue because he's the start of a quest line that gives you the Dark Thunder spell. Chapter 2, when you're sliding towards the Crouching Tiger Cellar, jump up and then do a heavy attack to get even higher, allowing you to land on this platform and get a new curio called Tiger Relic, which moderately increases critical hit chance. Chapter 3, after fighting the dragon in the Mirror Lake, run along the right side for a new drinks and soaks called Stranding Loong's Whisker, which moderately extends the duration of the next immobilize spell. Chapter 4, you can find one of the frog bosses and a meditation spot near the shrine Webbed Hollow, Lower Hollow. Turn left, run past these spiders, stay to the left, and you'll find a crack in the wall. Head up the steps, turn left right before the meditation spot at the top, follow the path, and it'll lead you to a frog called Bali Goo Ball. Chapter 5, you can get the Supreme Gourd, which is a mythical gourd and the best gourd in the game, and that's important because it gives you 10 uses. Upgrade the original gourd because you can get that to 9 uses, and then you're able to upgrade it to 10 uses from this guy. So to get here, go to the shrine Furnace Valley or CASHAPP Palace, run along the path up the steps. At the end of the path, just turn left, then take a slight right across the lava, and you'll find this man. Exhaust his dialogue, then you can examine the campfire, which upgrades your gourd to the Supreme Gourd. Chapter 6, you can get a hidden armor at the beginning of Chapter 6 from the shrine Foothills Verdant Path. Just turn around and fly up to the mountain in a straight line, then just take a slight right so you drop down near a fallen tree, and you'll find a chest for a whole armor set. You will also find meditation spots, which reminds me of Ghost of Tsushima. I'm sure you guys will like that too. These earn you points to level up, which is a nice connection to the skill tree. There's so much content in this game that you're bound to miss something, so don't feel bad. And that motivates you more to do New Game Plus, which was available at launch, and there's other features as well that aren't always available in games from the start, such as the ability to respec any of your stats at any time, and there's 3 main staff stances in this game which changes your moves, and at any point you can place your stats under a different stance when you want to switch things up. Now something I loved about this game was how I was constantly surprised. I think all of us love being able to play as the enemy in any game, whether that's a small enemy or a boss, and in Chapter 1, after beating a boss called Guanzi, you unlock a spell to become him at any point. Then you can transform to him while fighting Elder Jinchi, and Elder Jinchi has specific dialogue with Guanzi based on the lore. So he'll say things specific to him that he wouldn't say otherwise if he didn't transform to Guanzi. I mean, that's just crazy right there. I love the layers to this game. Then I was surprised again that you can actually become most of the enemies you beat in the game, which you can do after collecting their spirit after beating them, like all of these enemies you're seeing right here. And all the spirits have passive effects as well when you equip them. They have many uses too, like Wandering White being able to break down a red wall for an important item used to access the Loon secret bosses. By the way, you can also just use the spell Azure Dust to break this wall, or bait the Prince boss to break it. And RIP to all the people that skipped Wandering White because he disappears once you ring all 3 bells and fight the secret boss Elder Jinchi, and Wandering White is one of the best spirits in the game because of his damage and stagger. Continuing the surprises, I'd go to kill an enemy and he'd have post-death animations, which could theoretically kill you if you were close enough to him. Imagine dying like that. I'd go to pick up a plant and it would end up being an enemy. I'd go to pick up another plant and it was an actual boss. By the way, get to this easily missable boss by going to the shrine Forest of Felicity, follow the path until the first archway, turn left and go all the way down the mountain to a shrine called Towers of Karma. Take a left from there and you'll find this plant on the ground called Old Gensing Wai. When you finish the fox quest, it'll reward you with a new curio. Wasn't expecting that either. The special attacks bosses do a lot of damage, which were a lot of fun to experience, except for Yellow Wind Sage's kick. That was way too fast. A hub area that brought together all the vendors to a convenient place. Was never expecting that either. And then being able to challenge the blacksmith to a fight. And the fact that he was as hard as he was. Or at least at that point in the game, he was pretty tough. The moveset of the pig being farting and vomiting was another surprise, although not as pleasant. Most surprises in this game were good ones. However, that was not always the case. So even though this is my game of the year, here's the bad things I think there are about this game. I couldn't even play this game on Steam because of a memory problem. And I know my PC has enough memory, so I knew that wasn't the real issue, and I even allocated more memory to it. When I looked into it, turns out Intel drivers have some issues with this game, so I had to play the game through the cloud on NVIDIA GeForce Now, which costed me an extra $20 on top of what I already paid for the game. That was very frustrating. Now, PC Game Pass through Xbox and NVIDIA GeForce Now are different backups you guys could do if you ever have problems with games, or want to save money on games. games because there's some in the cloud out there that you may want. After I installed the shaders, I was able to leave GeForce and cancel my subscription so I didn't have to pay the next month, and then I played it on Steam again. Having said that, my memory problems sadly weren't behind me. My game would proceed to crash 4 to 5 times throughout my whole experience. The other bad thing about this game are all the frame drops. Now I think that's a PC only problem, and I still have that issue even with mods that supposedly fix them. So if you're on console, I don't think this applies to you, but this really held the game back from me. Another part of the game I didn't like were 2 places that were designed badly. One, Pagoda Realm, which is a jail you get sent to at one point, which has very confusing floors, plus enemies that shock you into a blurry trance, bats that knock you off the edge. Those were absolute trolls, the way they were placed as well. And on top of that, very annoying music. I love the music in this game, don't get me wrong, but not in Pagoda Realm. And 2 main bosses here were the worst ones in the entire game. Captain Lotus Vision, who just uses projectiles to fight you, which felt like fighting your sibling in a fighting game where they looked up the moveset and just memorized the fireballs, and Captain Wise Voice at the top of the jail that spams lasers. The second place that took away enjoyment from the game was Webbed Hollow. Some of it wasn't bad, but the beginning was an absolute maze and I had trouble finding out where to go. It was so frustrating that I made a video on how to get out of Webbed Hollow from the very first shrine once you jump down into the hole, and that video is on my channel so it can help you and me when we're in New Game Plus. And on that note, I also made a guide on how to get out of Pagoda Realm, which is on my channel too. That's how much I disliked both of those places and how much I really wanted to help out other people because I knew they were frustrated as well. Another aspect that holds this game back is the lighting, which can flash in some areas and places popping in and out. Despite all these problems, the game is still so much fun and is absolutely worth playing. It's my game of the year because of just every aspect of what makes a good game, and the standout being the amount of bosses and boss variety. I also love the attention to detail in this game, like the staff trailing in the snow or pebbles falling down the path on your way to Yellowwind Sage. And it's comical, enemies continue to hit you after they've been defeated. I know that I mentioned that before, but it's just a little detail like that that I love. And some poor monkey out there died to those post-death animation swings. I loved a combat mechanic called seeing through the enemy. Now the combat in the game is fairly simple, which I like. You have 3 different stances I mentioned earlier, and each one brings different moves. If you press your heavy attack after doing any amount of light attacks, and you time your heavy attack right when an enemy is about to hit you, then you'll do what's called seeing through the enemy. You'll swing your staff through the enemy's move, and the enemy won't hit you, but you'll hit them. This builds up momentum because you can continue doing heavy attacks, which differ depending on your stance. Now this really changes up the gameplay and adds a whole new element to the fighting. It gives you something to work on, like the timing of it, while changing up how you approach your fights. Now a question I've gotten a lot is, how does this compare to Elden Ring? Is this as hard as Elden Ring? And the answer is yes. But it kind of depends. So the difficulty is just as hard as Elden Ring, especially if you don't use your spells. But if you do use your spells, sometimes it's easier. Now there's some bosses in here that are just really hard even when you do use your spells, and it's still as hard as Elden Ring, but of course when you use your spells it makes it all easier. Now something that makes it even harder is if you use something called Spellbinder, and that prevents you from using any of your spells. Now why would you want to do that? Well, what that does is it makes you do more damage with your staff, but at the cost of not using your spells. So you have to fight bosses raw, with just your skill. Can you do that, little monkey? Every monkey has to ask himself, is it worth it? I'd say if you're looking for the Elden Ring experience, use Spellbinder. And then you go toe-to-toe against bosses without using any spells. And that challenge right there was really fun throughout the game for me. Now let's get into the details of what my experience was like. If you haven't bought the game yet, or if you're already playing and would like to hear what happened to this monkey's journey, I think you guys would enjoy this. The beginning of the game starts with you flying towards gigantic beasts. Anytime I see enemies on this scale, I think of God of War 3, and how every game out there seems to be afraid to make enemies above 5 feet tall. If you're hoping to fight them, you'll be happy to know you can later in the game. I had such an incredible fight at the start. It was like fighting Koten Khan in Ghost of Tsushima. I made it my absolute focus to survive the fight in case you were supposed to lose to Erlan, and I wanted to see what would happen if you beat him. I didn't know if you were supposed to lose to him or not, so it really did remind me of Koten Khan from Tsushima. It turns out you can beat him. Well, sort of. You can make his health bar go all the way down, but then he kills you. After all my focus to win the fight, you're supposed to lose. Shortly after the start, I fought this guy, called the Bull Guard. I guess he was supposed to guard the whole kingdom. He lost. Remember when I said there's so much content in this game that you're bound to miss something? I already missed a bunch of stuff at this point in the game. And actually, so did you. So at this point in the game, I'd already missed one of the best spells in the game, and the chance to fight one of the biggest bosses in the game. From the first shrine, there's a horse Gwai nearby, and once you exhaust all his dialogue, he'll reappear in chapter 2 to where you'll exhaust all his dialogue again, and this will repeat in every chapter up to chapter 5. Once you've talked to the horse, who shows up in different places in each chapter, in chapter 5, near the shrine Furnace Valley entrance, there's a cart nearby that'll have a prompt called Pull Forcefully. Interact with it, and you'll get a spell called Dark Thunder. Dark Thunder Thunder lets you transform into a horse guai immune to thunder damage, inflicting Thunder Bane on the enemy. Now unfortunately, once you're past chapter 1, the horse disappears and you can't go back. I really wish I would have exhausted all his dialogue. I did like a couple lines, I was like, this isn't important, let's just leave. Now you can go back, however, for something called Skanda Eyes, and the first one is right before the Bull Guard as well. If you just take a left right before the Bull Guard, there'll be a statue in the river, and you can collect a monkey eye, which is different than the Buddha eyes you start collecting in the next chapter, in chapter 2, which awakens a boss called a Shigandang. Once you collect all Skanda Eyes, you can awake a gigantic Shigandang in chapter 6, but it'll be a while before we do that. I was in chapter 6, and he didn't wake up, so I was like, oh, I think I'm missing something here. Someone in my chat let me know. So I went all the way back to chapter 1, and I can confirm you can collect all the eyes that late in the game. And then I found this gigantic baby. As I beat him up, I started to wonder if I was the bad guy here. I mean, he was a baby, and he was holding prayer beads, and he cried a bunch of times, and I baited him into hidden pillars that made him land on his cheeks. Yeah, I was definitely the bad guy here. I got what I deserved though. I actually got stuck on this boss. It was all fun and games until he shocked the ground and let out a hand shockwave move. Eventually I beat him. Then I decided to start a new save and challenged myself to a no-hit run for some random psychotic reason. Spent 2 hours doing that and finally got it. Was about to post a video on it, then realized he had chipped a tiny piece of my health off when he stepped towards me with his pinky toe! With his pinky toe! So then I redid it, spent a while getting it again, finally got it, and then I was able to move on. And it felt great, but that was the last time I did that challenge. Much respect to people that do that on a regular basis and somehow manage to keep their sanity. Good thing I stayed on him for the spirit though, since it's one of the best ones in the game, and ripped all those people that lost him because he disappears once you ring all 3 bells and fight the secret boss Elder Jinchi in chapter 1. I didn't realize this next thing until beating the game. Looking back on Wondering White, he actually had one of the coolest death animations. And maybe the longest one as well. As I was wondering who was the bad guy here, I watched him slowly disintegrate into the wind. Maybe he was the bad guy after all, because he took so long to die. How rude. Then I fought a madman called White-Clad Noble, and the difficulty suddenly shot up with this boss. To beat him, just stay back because he's very aggressive up close, and if you just stay far away, he'll do a thrust move to reach you, and then he needs to recover. Now the trick for this fight is just staying away the whole time, and just let him come to you the whole entire fight, which I didn't do. I enjoyed all the bosses I come to fight in chapter 1. The scenery was great along the way, the music had already struck a chord with me, and ringing the 3 bells for the secret area was just really cool. Later, in an animation, I'd come to understand the meaning behind the bosses and the story, which was fun looking back on everything at the end of each chapter. So every time you beat a chapter, an animation will play, and it's really fun understanding what the fudge you saw that whole chapter. Then when I fought the bear, everything was fine, until his mist formed. For some reason, I just couldn't get the timing right on dodging it, as it was hard to tell the distance relation to the mist and the monkey. Funny enough, I'd come to have a random kryptonite against a random boss in each chapter. It was kind of fun seeing which ones would challenge me. Then after beating him, this animation played, and wow, this was so beautiful. The animation, music, story, how unique everything felt. By this point, I knew I was playing something special. When I stream games, it can sometimes be hard to focus on what's happening because of reading the chat, and not even just that, just knowing others are there watching me, and feeling that pressure to keep things fast-paced and entertaining. But for this, I was totally immersed in this beautiful cinematography. It's really so good that I would sit down to watch a whole show in this animation. Chapter 1 was an introduction to something entirely new for me. Unfortunately, I heard some people gave up on this because it was hard for them, and that's really sad for me because they really missed out on such a great experience. If you're thinking of getting this game, or you're stuck in chapter 1 still because you're absolute doo-doo butter, it's worth fighting your way through this to experience what's to come. Please don't give up. The game is based on the classic Chinese novel, Journey to the West. You're going to see things you've never thought of before, and it's going to be really enjoyable. Even after making it through chapter 1, I really had no idea what I was going to see next. I mean, have you ever seen a monkey make a deal with a dog? Chapter 2. I met a dog at the beginning of chapter 2, and he said he'd give me pills. I thought, hey, why not? But to do business with the dog, I had to fight the frog. I didn't know this at the time, but the dog was unintentionally setting me up with a mythical frog spirit, which happens to be one of the best ones in the game, and that happens when you defeat each of the frog bosses in each chapter. And the frogs were fun to fight. I like the scenery change and even the different themes shrines have with each chapter. I noticed the enemies got harder at this point, like the Rat Captain mini-boss. And at the start of chapter 2, this headless guy plays, and at first my ears were so confused what they were hearing, but soon loved this music. Normally there's a lot of things to do in each area. For example, this area with the boss, Earth Wolf, there's a well nearby, which is the final location use a rattle drum. And then you're able to jump down the well and fight a secret boss called the Mad Tiger. In the same area, you'll see those steps with that small platform to the right. That's where where the horse Guai goes to next after you exhaust all his dialogue in Chapter 1. He leans against a post on the right side. So in this one area, you have the Earth Wolf boss and his spirit, the final location for the Rattle Drum quest and Mad Tiger boss, the horse Guai for the Dark Thunder spell questline, and another spirit you can collect called Rat Archer if you go towards the door in the middle, which opens up after beating Earth Wolf. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this vid, this game rewards you for exploring and makes you feel good that you checked out what's around you. Although, curiosity killed the cat, or in this case, the rat. If you talk to the rat at the top of the hill in this shack in Chapter 2 and exhaust all his dialogue, that gets a Rat Captain boss killed in the next chapter. If you're trying to fight every single boss in this game, which I was, don't talk to this guy here. You think it would be the other way around, but it's not, so skip this NPC. On the other hand, if you just want something called the Ashen Slumber Transformation, which is great for whale farms, and don't care about the Rat Captain boss being alive, make sure to exhaust all the dialogue with this rat NPC here, and that kills the Rat Captain boss so you can pick up the sword out of his belly. Little did I know that would be the most complicated boss to find in the entire game, and if you guys need help with that, check out my all bosses guides on my channel. There's a little overview for you guys, but the details are in my boss guide. Next, I found a father and son taking a nice walk in the desert, so I decided to ram my staff up their bonus tip for you guys so you don't miss a spirit: kill the father first, then the son. This sounds kind of bad. If you do that, the son becomes enraged and his attacks become harder and more vicious, which is really fun, and then you get his spirit. If you kill the son first, you won't be able to get his spirit. Now, when you kill the father first and then the son, you can still fight the son's other brother, that prince inside that cave area next to the red wall. So don't worry, you won't be able to miss out on a boss. You can still fight that prince. The only difference is the father won't call the son up from the canyon. Instead, you're gonna go to the ledge and call the son up. In my first playthrough, I thought that you could only fight that boss when you kill the son first. So unfortunately, I killed the son first and not the father, and I missed out on the son's spirit. Another tip, get the son low on health, but don't kill him. Then kill the father. So then when the son becomes enraged, he won't have as much health. A little tip for you guys when you guys play this. After ruining that family's walk in nature and cleaning feces off my stuff, I ran up the hill to a very important shrine you should remember: Sandgate Village, Valley of Despair. Important because to the right is a cave that leads to a big red wall. Behind the red wall is a key item called Loon Scales that gives you access to different loon bosses in the game, like accessing the waterfall in Chapter 1 or the sandfall in Chapter 2. In this case, the father tells his son that I killed his brother, whoopsie daisy, and then tells him to hunt down the monkey, me. I don't think this family gets along because he ate him. I was surprised at this, as you can see, although why was I surprised with a face like that? This red wall can be broken by baiting the prince to hit the wall, Wandering White Spirit, or if you didn't get Wandering White, the Azure Dust spell from the Man in Stone quest later in this chapter, so don't worry if you miss Wandering White. And I was having a lot of fun with a different stance you'll unlock by now called the Pillar Stance. This one here is the Thrust Stance. I felt really great that I was able to finish off this family with variety. I entered the red wall and got the Loon Scales in front of a wall with art, reminiscent of God of War Ragnarok Merles. You know you're approaching something dangerous when crows fly off a pile of corpses. I used to have a ginger cat. He never stopped eating, like this one here. The first thing out of this one's mouth is asking for more food. So it was like I got shrunken down to the size of an ant and had to fight my pet. This guy's moves was awesome. I absolutely loved his martial arts fighting style, and I remember someone in my stream saying he was their favorite boss. I don't think I've ever fought in a pool of blood before in a game, so that was also a very welcome first. After I convinced my cat I wouldn't give him his 10th bowl of cat food, the headless guy returned with his catchy songs to give me rock solid, which I'd never use. I plan to for my New Game Plus though. And there's so many spells, playstyles, weapons, armor, and bosses that I missed or didn't use. That makes me excited for New Game Plus. Then I got past the waterfall with the Loon Scales item we got earlier and fought Red Loon. Bosses behind a waterfall or sandfall were nice additions. Ladies and gentlemen, just when you think you've seen it all, the rock monster wrestles the other one, and my man whips out a wrestling move on him, and the crowd goes wild. If you go around this area with the Stone Vanguard boss, and instead get all 6 Buddha eyes first, you can wake up a nearby boss called Shigandang, who would then fight the Stone Vanguard for you. I mean, how cool is that? And then you get to see a bunch of wrestling moves. It's layers like that to this game which makes the replay value so good. Black Loon. This boss was fun. He sends out shockwaves on the ground. I enjoyed taking the risk and jumping over his swipes. Slamming his weapons together was also a satisfying move to watch. Summoning a dust storm to suffocate me was very enjoyable, thank you. I just really enjoyed this boss. He had a fun moveset. And it's funny, I heard some people didn't know you could wait on the rocks to evade his shockwaves. So some people out there were just playing hopscotch with him. It was fun purposely doing this though, to see if I could dodge each one, which worked out very well. I dodged it effortlessly. It's so satisfying when both the boss and I have really low health and the fight can go either way. This happened a lot throughout the game. I think I was destined to make this outcome in many bosses, and I'm glad it did too. and I'll just let this play out. At this point in the game, I was rounding up the secret bosses I had access to, and so next up was Mad Tiger. The real mad person here was me, because I decided to do no spells allowed. I proceeded to spend the next 2 hours getting whooped by this guy. I apparently didn't learn my lesson from Wondering White. Now at this point in the game, I had improved, but I clearly wasn't ready for this kind of challenge, and because this fight was such a grind, it pushed me to get better. And that's one of the best things about Souls games, just that self-improvement. I'm not sure why I do this to myself, but I know some of you out there like to give birth to a little goblin and watch it grow up into an abomination. After centuries had passed, mankind had moved on to other games, and Adam had just finally beaten Wondering White and Mad Tiger. My cat came back to haunt me and fought me again. After my nightmare ended, I was able to go to the king, except I didn't. I somehow missed the huge guy standing on top of the rock, and I thought he was waiting for me out in the desert instead. I literally ran across the desert looking for a boss. It was like 10 minutes later, and I finally realized I should go back. Eventually, I figured it out, banged on the drum, fought the secret boss Fubin. He might be the biggest boss I fought at this point in the game. This rat helped me fight him. There were cutscenes within this fight, not just at the end, making it such a fun experience. Speaking of, the Yellow Wind Sage. He's who I fought next. He was definitely the hardest boss I fought up to this point. His fast kick special attack is so fast you could barely have time to react to it. It's actually absurd. He kicked my teeth in, I came out looking like a donkey, so I took a break and upgraded my Wondering White spirit. You see, it's crucial to set yourself up for a fight. I was ready. I did a perfect dodge against his attack. Then his tornado threw me up into the air and slammed me down. The sage was probably drooling on the floor laughing at me as he lazily sends slashes over my way to kill me. Now, there's vessels in this game which are additional things that help you. One of them is called Wind Tamer. This counters anything with wind, making it the perfect counter against Sage. I used it when he didn't spawn his tornado like an absolute genius, but even if you do this too, you'll still stun him for a long time, allowing lots of easy hits, and then you could land your final hit on him for a great gust. As for the Chapter 2 animation, it was scary, but in a good way. The animations really brought out a lot of emotions throughout this game. Chapter 3. Well, you guys know how this went. When was the last time you saw something like this, right? Eastern games will take over the gaming industry because they're different. They take longer to make so the quality is better, and they're not afraid to take risks. They do different things. They don't follow the same boring formula a lot of Western AAA companies do. Wu-Tang Fallen Feathers and Ballad of Ontaria are upcoming games that look really good. Check those out. When was the last time you saw a weird baby pull a dragon out of his ballsack? Everything about this fight was fun. Until my arch nemesis showed up. Hey, at least this time he didn't fart in my face. Now the monkey is in jail, and the struggle to escape begins. If you'd like a new curio that increases your attack when you're in Cloud Step, that's what the curio Auspicious Lantern does. You get that after you beat all 9 Lantern Wardens in the Pagoda Realm, which I definitely didn't do. I completely missed that. I think we all did. Except for that one dedicated monkey out there that stuck it out through that blurry trance. But who knew getting a curio from that would be a thing, right? If you do want that curio, make sure to beat them all before you defeat Captain Wisevoice, who's the big ball-headed guy at the very top of the jail, because he disables that blurry trance that shows those Lantern Wardens. After finally making it to the top, I got my butt kicked by the captain. I think he's just motivation to send people back to their jail cell. Until I found a strategy that worked for me, which is when he lowers his head, immobilize him when he does that, then use Pluck of Many for all the monkeys to attack his head. Azure Dust Spell tanked lots of his laser hits, and that absolutely saved me as well. Now normally I'd learn a boss's moveset, but everything just felt completely random with this guy. He just felt bullcrap. I was glad to get past this area. Then this monkey motherfudger shows up again. But that's okay, I'd rather fight him than anything in Pagoda Realm, or my memory crash errors. By the way, I had to fight this monkey all over again because it didn't save. It's alright though, because he was a fun boss to fight, plus he's my arch nemesis. The snowy path after the blue-eyed samurai corridor leads to a gigantic turtle. Now it was fun fighting the next boss. I even got to ride on a dragon, which was amazing. And going back to what I said about enjoying surprises, I absolutely loved how menacing the pig sounded and the close-up on his face. I genuinely thought that he was going to be huge, and then this little piglet comes out and tumbles off the edge. And then I was on a gigantic turtle that whole time, and that was another nice surprise. Then I fought this thing. I got the feeling from the beginning that we weren't meant to fight, and sure enough, we became best friends. He let me inside a scroll, I challenged the blacksmith to a fight, got my butt kicked, then foolishly placed a no spell challenge on myself because I don't learn. Hours later, I finally beat him. What can I say? I love Souls games and the thrill just thinking how sweet that victory would taste. Going into this game, I actually made it my goal to take my time with this game and fight as many bosses as I could. That would make me enjoy and learn more on my journey to the West. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. W. Oh my gosh, went over him. And then Lopez donated $2. What's happening right now, boys? Thank you, Lopez. I really appreciate you. Oh, he missed me, I was down! Here's something really important I want you guys to know. As someone who has played video games from the 90s and has made video games a really big part of their life, when you know you're playing a masterpiece, or simply a game that you're really enjoying, take your time with it. You're only going to play your first playthrough once. I haven't played The Witcher 3 yet, even though I bought it a couple years ago when it was on sale. And I've seen people say if there was one game they could erase their memory of to experience it the first time again, it would be that. I'm pretty sure we all missed the boss Apermanabat, and disappears once the pig separates from you later in this chapter. He is near the skeleton along the shore if you kept going straight, but instead I turned around up the hill to this NPC getting attacked by bats. I also didn't think anything of this NPC, but of course he ended up being one of the most important ones and gives you the most powerful spell, Spellbinder. I ran away from him. Good job, Adam. I tested my bows out, which opened up the next area. Before leaving, I had to take some pictures with how beautiful the world was. After taking pictures, I was ready to keep going. Fighting the next boss with my new Ebon Flow blacksmith transformation was fun. One of the most emotional parts of the game is the Fox Gwai quest. It was so beautiful. I love the dialogue between him and this one guy that he finds. I really loved all the lines with this quest and how it weaves into the animation that plays at the end of this chapter. Now, on my way there to this monk at the Thunderclap Temple, I fought this huge giant, and I always love it when I fight bosses on this kind of scale. There's a Captain's Spirit nearby, near the Shrine Longevity Road. You need 4 total spirits to give to the NPC in the jail in Pagoda Realm if you want to fight the Rat Captain boss. My biggest obstacle at the temple were the great views. Had to stop again real quick for some pictures, except this time as a fox, which was also not expected at all. That was really cool. I was wondering what would happen if you stayed in fox form against a boss. And yeah, this guy did not care. This abomination tried to stomp a fox. What a monster. This was definitely the weirdest looking boss in the game, by the way. He had to be put down for trying to stomp a fox. Also, he's another spirit you need for the Rat Captain, making that 2 total spirits now. The other 2, which I didn't go over yet, are in Pagoda Realm, Captain Lotus Vision, and Captain Wise Voice. The guide to find all 4 spirits and the Rat Captain boss is in my boss guide on my channel. This guy right here was the coolest enemy type in the game, and I really loved how he shot fire out of his kneecaps. Makes you wonder what would happen if this dude farted, or God forbid, sharded. My face cam's blocking the giant on the right, but you guys can pretend those are my legs if you want. Fighting a big giant and myself was a nice twist. After that, I met up with the baby again, who became Yellow Brow. This whole section at the end was amazing. After beating him, he sucks you up into his pouch, where my arch nemesis eagerly awaited me. This setting was really fun, knowing we were fighting inside his bag, and then you get placed inside a miniature battle, and this is what I mean. The whole section of this part was amazing. And then the ending here with Yellow Brow was the hardest in the game up until this point. And his moves were unexpected, like this gold armor he put on, or that he could turn your monkeys against you and brainwashes them with a shockwave. And every boss was just really hype, and there were so many times we'd both have low health, and the satisfaction when beating a boss, especially a hard one, never went away. It was a really nice reoccurring theme throughout this whole game, so if you're coming from a Souls background and want that thrill, you'll find that here in Wukong. The ending animation that played when this chapter finished was really sad and displayed mankind's greed really well. Someone doesn't need to be beautiful on the outside to be beautiful on the inside. This monster helped a starving village. Even after all that help, it wasn't enough. Unfortunately, some people always want more, just a little more. Just a little more. At the end of every chapter, I always found myself sitting back and going through every piece of the artwork because of how nice it all looked and to learn more about the story. Chapter 4, The Spider Mosh Pit. Some poor fella out there has arachnophobia. Combine that with the maze that Webbed Hollow is. Good luck. Fun fact for getting the Lantern Hoarder spirit, once you go down into the Webbed Hollow, then you return to the Shrine Village of Langsea, Estate of the Zoo, and go up the steps into this courtyard here, where you fight the second sister spider boss. It'll be daytime instead of nighttime, because you made some progress into Webbed Hollow. During the day, that's when the Lantern Hoarder enemy will show up, and then you could fight them and get the spirit. So if you're wondering why it's nighttime and the guy isn't showing up for the spirit, you gotta make more progress in Webbed Hollow. I'm not sure how much, and then when you come back, it'll be daytime. So he only shows up in the day. Here's me running past the hole you're supposed to jump down to reach the Webbed Hollow. Funny thing is, I got lost here even before I went down the Webbed Hollow. I didn't even see that hole, I went past it. No, actually I saw the hole, but I didn't think you're supposed to go down into it. Eventually, I made it to the Webbed Hollow, and then I got lost again. Found this cobweb, hit it, a boss came out. He was a fun boss. Little did I know, beating him teleports him to a new location later in the chapter, and he's the key to discovering the secret area Purple Cloud Mountain. Rare footage of me using the Ring of Fire. Waited for the boss to come to me to be in range, but it didn't happen. I didn't really like the Ring of Fire in this game because of that reason, but I guess pairing the thrust dance with it could work. The scenery here for the boss sent to be Gwai was pretty cool. At first I thought it was a giant mound of poo, but then it was a giant mound of skulls. Fighting a hand was one of the most unique bosses I thought, and because it becomes part of the landscape when you kill it, I spent 2 hours playing with these. Nah, just kidding. But I like the design of this bridge. Remember when I'd make myself do challenges? Well, my latest genius one was this, a no cloud step challenge across the bridge, and it worked out, if my goal was dying. And alas, I beat the spider bridge boss. Took a break from Webbed Hollow to fight Cian Loon, and he was the first boss I really tested out the thrust dance with. I realized thrust dance might be the best stance in the game, because of its ability to go back and forth from seeing through the enemy in the whirlwind attack, then backing up and doing another heavy attack, or you could just go back into the whirlwind, and its ability to quickly resume combos is effective and fun. Not to mention something else that happens later in the game, which is absolutely huge with the thrust dance, but I'll save that for later, just for spoiler warnings. By the time you make it to the end of the video, I'll assume you don't care about that. This is another reason why thrust dance might be the best stance. Did you know if you whirlwind behind the enemy, you can stun lock them? For some reason, I decided to return to Captain Lotus Vision. I have no idea why. Oh yeah, it might have been for all the spirits. Actually, it was just for self-satisfaction purposes. Another reason I don't like this guy is because on top of all the projectiles he shoots, when you get close to him, he just teleports away. So good luck if you decide to fight this guy. You can see the pain on my face. Next, I wanted to uncover some things I missed, so I went back to chapter 2, where I fought the Tiger Vanguard and activated the passage in the pool. Kind of funny I missed this, but I'm glad I came back to it. I loved going down into here. It's just a really cool area, and this is where you can get to that secret platform above the sand slide right before the dog at the Crouching Tiger Temple Cellar Shrine. Found Yellow Loon and got my butt absolutely whooped. I stayed here for about 15 attempts and couldn't beat him, so I decided to go back to him later. This fight here was a love-hate fight for me. I thought it was nice, involving environmental effects, which was mud covering me and slowing my dodging down, which I was actually fine with, until this motherfudger pulls out a shockwave move out of his hat. I wasn't expecting this fight to be as hard as it was, probably because the comical side the pig brings. I was like, oh, it's the pig. He's funny, he'll be nice and easy. He wasn't, actually. Footage of Adam getting swarmed by the Webbed Hollow gang, a flying bug, skeleton lizard, and a scorpion. Violet Spider was a fun fight. The thing with fighting spiders in this game for me is it's hard to tell when they're attacking because of all their legs. It looks like they're always attacking. I never had a bad fight with spiders though, they were always fun. I thought of Frodo from Lord of the Rings when I got caught up in their webs. Once I beat her, I thought that was the last of the spiders. People who are afraid of spiders were probably relieved at this point. I was a little wrong about that. I love how pulling this plant out of the ground was actually a boss. Plant versus centipede. Then I entered the secret area in chapter 4, Purple Cloud Mountain, which you do after beating Venom Taoist for the second time. Like I mentioned about the wall art earlier, I thought of God of War Ragnarok again, which is always a good thing. Monkey talks to a snake. Height competition versus a tree. Taoist me is someone you could actually fight once you deliver an item Violet Hail to him, which you get from a random drop from the surrounding enemies. I completely missed this, which was a shame because he gives you a spell that gives you immunity to poison. If you're wondering why I said I missed this, even though I showed it in my All Bosses Guide for Chapter 4. That's because I get on a new save to record things I missed, but for my main save, this one, I unfortunately missed fighting him and the Scorpion Lord because I fought the Dusk Veil. Once you're here, Taoist me and the Scorpion Lord disappear, so make sure you fight them before you go up those steps to the Dusk Veil. I liked how the Scorpion Lord fights for you though. I was cheering him on and he seemed to do great until Blood Rain melted him like ice cream. DLC came out that lets you play any instrument you want with VR support, which was pretty fun. Just kidding, that would be amazing though. Fighting this boss was tough, but a lot of fun, and that concluded another incredible chapter on this journey. Chapter 5. The level design in Chapter 5 was genius. I also thought the carts were a great idea for boss fights. What the fudge is happening? Whenever there's two bosses at once, it's always hilarious to hear how they talk to each other, that banter they have with each other, but also the gameplay mechanics there, having to watch out for two of them are really cool. This happened a bunch of times where the game throws two bosses at once at you, and that's something you really don't see a lot of in games. Not too long after that, I was fighting two more bosses at once. It's honestly really impressive the game can throw so many bosses at you and doesn't feel repetitive, and as I mentioned before, they all have different movesets as well, so it doesn't feel stale. Not one, but two huge fire giants were up on the menu next. Funny enough, despite their size, they were super easy, which wouldn't describe this fight. Some of these bosses will get you, man. This is one of those right here, with all their phases that they do, and the damage output that goes up. Centipede versus Ball, who wins? Wonder and White versus Ball. Immobilize versus Ball. Then I tried to lure this guy out, so he died to the Bull. And my mission was finally complete. I could finally stop playing with my balls. Took a picture of the scenery, as in the mountains. Yaksha King was a tough boss. He does so much damage with that big red slash move he does. He might be the boss that does the most damage per attack at this point in the game, because that red slash really does do a lot of damage. This guy really tested me. The animation that played afterwards was really sad. And now, for the last chapter of the game. Chapter 6. The first boss in this chapter is Supreme Inspector, and he had me stuck for a bit. His moveset has a lot of variety. I wonder if he has one of the biggest movesets in the game. I would not be surprised if he does. And it's hard to predict his next move. What I liked about him was how he felt like a bunch of bosses combined. Now the game introduced Somersault Cloud to me, although I thought I'd miss this area to my right, so I went down the mountain to fight the rhino first before testing out the cloud. Then I was like, what the fudge is that thing in the back? I was a little concerned because I was like, how is that fight gonna go? Found a hippo with his own bodyguards. That was really impressive. Tried to fight the son of stones, but he couldn't be bothered. I found the bug later on, tried to ride it, and was really confused because the monkey loses his balance. It looks like you need to press R2 to hold again, when really you just need to hold it the whole time. Finally got it in the end, and thankfully I upgraded my health and stamina enough to hold on, so I was able to tank my way through the burning bit. And tip for you guys, use Fireproof Mantle at the start of the ride, or maybe right before this final bit if you can, so you don't take fire damage. Glad I stuck it out because I got Wukong armor from it. Found the Yellowwind Sage, but in deer form, and a million tornadoes instead of one. This guy was tough because you'd have to stay away from his tornadoes, and sometimes one would go behind your camera, so you'd really have to pay attention to where they are. But the bigger reason why he's hard is his attacks are really delayed, making them hard to predict. I never got the timing down with this guy, but I racked up a lot of damage with Pillar Stance, specifically with Sweeping Gale and Churning Gale, which carried me throughout this fight. Actually carried me throughout a lot of this game. Finally put my poison armor to use with this guy. I noticed this game loves to give you armor that's perfect for a boss after you beat him, and I think they want you to use them for New Game Plus to keep the replay value going. And we finally found something smaller than the pig. Despite its small size, I knew this thing would be a monster. I knew things would get messy if the insect escaped his hands. Sure enough, I was about to fight the goddamn Wolverine. Not gonna lie, this little bug messed me up. His damage becomes insane on the second phase when he bloodies his blades in blood. This man was determined to stay in this guy's stomach, bro. I was in this pig's stomach way too long, and he was one of those bosses where I almost beat him. He had 1 HP, and he beat me. But finally, after beating the Mantis, I fought the giant chicken egg. Start the fight by using the cloud and flying as close as you can to him before he knocks you off. Now you don't have to run very far now. The big scale of this boss was fun, but unexpectedly, he was one of the most boring bosses in the game. He takes a while to attack, and it takes forever for him to keep his arms still, which is when you can hit crystals on them to damage him. I don't mind a boss that's slow paced, but this was too slow paced, I thought. Next up, I went back a chapter to fight a boss I missed, and she reminded me of Guan Mao because of the similar enemies he'd summoned from the ground. The hardest part about her was just getting through these little worms so I could fight her. I fought a cart here, which was fun, and got past this wall, which led to a really fun fight with a ball. It was really cool seeing how the ball turns out to have monsters inside of it, and some of my favorite moments in this game were times where I took 2 bosses on at once. This was one of them. That, as well as the scale and number of bosses, is just something you don't see in many games. What I loved about this fight is just when I was about to get a crucial hit in, they timed their swap outs perfectly. They had the timing down so well. I was like, oh, I respect that. Fighting this boss was very fast paced, and he leaves fire everywhere, so make sure to use Fireproof Mantle Vessel. Found another poison boss. By this time, I had the mythical frog. I forgot to equip a brain on my frog, so it used poison against poison. Then I found another loon fella and whacked him with Pillar Stance, which helped me so much in the endgame. I was so excited to get the Wukong staff, which came with the Wukong stance. Then I began the mountain climb to return home, and use new moves on enemies. Even at this late point in the game, it's still throwing new mechanics at me. I love having lots of enemies on the screen at once too, which is something I always look forward to in games. I found my little home village at the top where I began my journey, and this time I found a rock. I went inside, and I began a journey through Wukong's memories. This is what happened on my very first attempt against the final boss. I almost beat him my very first time, and then I lose like that with a tiny bit of health. That is just crazy, man. That's Souls games for you. Now, the final boss was the hardest fight in the game. After losing to him on that first run, I messed around on my second run so I could trigger a different cutscene. There's a secret cutscene you can get if you purposely drink your gourd twice in a row, and your total gourd amount needs to be below halfway for that to work. So once you get your gourd below halfway, or at halfway, then waste your gourd twice, and he's gonna freeze you. And here, I'm getting close to beating the final boss in the game. When I began chapter 6, it hit me that I was getting close to beating the game, and I really didn't want it to end, so I'm glad I took my time with it, and I encourage you guys to do the same with games you love. Next, I wanted to do the secret ending, which has its own secret cutscene. And let me tell you something, it is absolutely worth it. It is so amazing. To get the secret ending, go to the Shrine Pagoda Realm, Snowveil Trail. Run down the path, across a bridge, then run left all the way until you find a big twisty vine-looking door. You can access this area earlier in the game, but you can only go through the door at the very top, which is where the Buddha baby is, once you find all the secret areas and beat the secret bosses. Once you do all that, you can go through. I was so happy to see it was Erlang, until I started fighting him. I actually completely forgot about him, so it was nice seeing him again. Difficulty-wise, when you compare him and the final boss of the game, I'd say Erlang might be harder, but they feel pretty close. The monkey's hard because of all his phases, but Erlang's hard because of that enormous armor bar he has. I got absolutely shredded by his projectile move, but once I learned that timing, I was able to deflect them. I really loved his axe move he does in the sky. The way I was able to beat him was to see through the enemy, and I also switched to smash stance. This whole sequence at the end is my favorite part of the game. I had so much fun here, so it's absolutely worth getting to all the secret areas in the game and beating the secret bosses. The beginning of the game with all the bosses had come full circle because now you get to fight them. They all have brutal deaths, which is one of the most satisfying things in the whole game, and I thought I was going to fight them as Wukong at the beginning, but we died. So now we get to avenge him and fight these guys. And I could use different spells, some of them being completely different than what I already have. Now that I beat Erlang and his buddies, it was time to face the final boss once again, which now gives a secret ending and a new cutscene, except this time I had Erlang's staff, which buffs thrust dance moves. And you may have noticed I mentioned a little hint of that earlier, how thrust dance could change and how it's one of the best dances in the game, but there's something else that comes later, and this is that, Erlang's staff. Let me tell you, this has got to be the other most satisfying thing in the whole game. When you do a heavy attack after a light attack, you shoot thousands of spears toward an enemy. Here I'm lasering 2 monkeys at once with this move. I mean, it really doesn't get better than that. At first it ends the same, but then the secret cutscene plays from beating Erlang before Wukong. The animation is so good in this game, so who doesn't want another one as well? So that's what it was like playing Black Myth Wukong. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing about my experience, and one day I'll do New Game Plus, and I'm going to make boss guides on how to find all the bosses in the chapters for the remaining chapters I haven't done yet, as well as modded gameplay, which I hope you guys like. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.